Awesome. So welcome this morning. We're privileged to have with us on one of our EMCSA coffee sessions, Mr. George Mienie, the Chief Executive Officer of AutoTrader South Africa. Most of our South African audience will know AutoTrader. George, we were actually just having a real brief chat as we started getting going about how you walk the walk and talk the talk when it comes to EVs. And you were telling us today that you are busy, very excitedly taking through the I-Pace or the next I-Pace through its paces. Give us a quick introduction about yourself, where you're from, and your kind of road towards electric vehicles.
Thanks, Robert. As well, I'm at the Jaguar Experience Centre, Jaguar Land Rover Experience Centre in Loneal, and I'm busy taking the 2021 I-Pace through its paces on their skid pan and track. It's an amazing vehicle, but it's an amazing experience. And I would encourage anybody who wants to experience an electric vehicle to come here, and take the I-Pace through its paces. So, from a background point of view, AutoTrader is an independent. We're not shackled to any particular brand in terms of car brand, and so it gives us a really good, I think, independent voice in the market, and I think South Africa is moving too slowly. Most countries have set the deadline for the move from ICE to EVs at anywhere between 2030 and 2040 to 2045. But if you think about 2030 is around the corner. And if we don't move as a country in the next 12 to 24 months and start making real serious moves towards an electric future, we're going to fall behind. And I think our vehicle fleet in the country is going to age, and we will become another, and I don't want to diss the country, but I think it was Brazil that started to get the relics of old vehicles and old manufacturing techniques in their country, which made them behind the technology curve, and we run the risk of the exact same thing. So I can't really kind of talk to electric mobility and electric vehicles unless I drive one myself. So I bought the Jaguar I-Pace, and I've experienced it now for the last probably just over 2 months. And people often bring up this load shedding issue, and I haven't experienced load shedding give me any hassles with my EV. Now, some people might say, well, we're in lockdown, you're not driving anywhere. I'm driving. I'm using 20% of that battery almost daily. I can't say every day, but almost daily, which is literally like a commute to work and back. And I haven't experienced any issues with load shedding. So I've taken long trips with the car. I've got experience in that. And I can honestly say, living with an EV in South Africa today is very possible. So it can only get better. So I think that adoption curve that has to happen gets steeper and steeper and steeper the longer we wait. And it gets to a point where the tipping point will make it so that our ICE vehicle fleet in South Africa starts to age, because we won't be able to get any new ICE vehicles. Now, we also manufacture here. 60% of our exports, or over 60% of let me rephrase it. Over 60% of our production is exported.
Sure.
Which means that Europe's not going to want our ICE vehicles. The South African economy is not enough to sustain our vehicle production. We don't have the demand. I mean, we're not a very big economy. So therefore, given that over 7% of our GDP goes to vehicles, and I would argue that it's actually higher and probably closer to 20%, because that 7% only takes into account new vehicles. What about all the other parts of the industry that are shackled to, secondhand car sales, tires, all those things? I reckon it's north of 7% of our GDP. So it's a very important part of South Africa's economy. And if we're not careful, we will then become another Australia, because Australia lost all their vehicle manufacture. Well, I think they gave it up, but they import all their vehicles, which is an expensive exercise. And then we've also got to be careful we don't become, I think it's Brazil. We don't become another Brazil. because Brazil was saddled with aging vehicle manufacturing technology. I think they still manufactured the old VW microbus for a very long time after everyone else stopped doing it. So we need to move this country in that direction, and I think there's a lot of things we can do besides only giving up government giving up taxes. I don't think the government has to give up taxes. I think they just need to restructure it in a way, use corporate business to.
Oh, sorry. I think we momentarily lost George there. We'll just give him a moment. I think he'll keep back. I believe his line just dropped off completely. Just talking us through some of his work and some of his e-mobility opportunities and how he's preaching and practicing what he preaches. I think I can see. Yeah, there we go. He's just rejoining us. George, hey, welcome back. Sorry, man, we lost you there for a second.
Sorry about that, Robert. I'm using my mobile phone, and someone tried to phone me.
Oh goodness.
There should be some rule in Zoom that you can't get a call while you're on the Zoom call. Anyway, so I think that if we don't move very quickly in the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to see an aging fleet of second-hand vehicles in our country, which is also a recipe for second-hand car price increases, because there's only a certain pool. New cars have to feed into the used car pool, and there's other things that the government can do and the country can do besides just lowering taxes. Sure. Incentives. The government can restructure things so that those taxes are still there. I mean, everybody has to agree that taxes are an important part of any economy. I mean, the government is the biggest business in the world, and it's the biggest monopoly in the world. So I think our platform, AutoTrader, the independents, and my voice in trying to drive the country's move or digital transformation to electric mobility. And I think we'll go through this phase of hybrids, but we're going to end up with the battery electric vehicles. Hydrogen vehicles spoke about a lot. Clean energy, yes, but can you imagine trying to put up hundreds or even thousands of hydrogen filling stations? Do we even have the pipelines to do that? So battery electric with the electric infrastructure that we've got has to be the future, and we can't buck the trend of the rest of the world, because South Africa's not an island.
Yeah, no, definitely. And George, I mean, let's just quickly talk. I mean, talk about AutoTrader being an independent, how you guys have pushed the narrative, and I think you've done some great stuff. Part of that was you guys undertook some really interesting research last year, where you were using your consumer base and asking the questions that I think people maybe have been afraid to ask when it comes to electric vehicles. Can you share with us some of those insights and maybe some of the ones that you weren't expecting to come out? Because I know you've been talking about them, but maybe just give us a little rundown of some of the highlights.
Yeah, so we did the first study last year, and the study showed us three things. First of all, the price point in South Africa for consumer adoption is under 500,000 rand. So, just to kind of give some context, and it's not me, I'm not trying to talk AutoTrader up, but it's relevant, and that is AutoTrader operates at scale when it comes to consumer engagement. We've got over 10 million visits. Consumers open 75 million pages a month, and we do roughly. Well, we do tens of millions of searches. The consumers do tens of millions of searches on our platform every month, and so the relevance is there in terms of the car buyer and scale. So we did this study, and the study is relevant in terms of the number of consumers that actually answered the study, and we got the real kind of data and sense that in order for South Africa to get to adoption, we have to have the price point of an EV below 500,000 rand on average. Okay, yes, people are buying the 1.2, 1.8 million rand I-Paces, but on average we have to get that number down to below 500,000. So that's the first thing. The second thing in last year's study was that range anxiety was a factor. So for us, that's more of an education thing than a reality. Okay. And then the third big thing was charging time. Consumers want to be able to charge their EVs in under 60 minutes. Okay. Now, again, that's an education thing, because there has to be this behavioral change in treating your EV like you treat your phone. You charge it. So it's almost like the ABCs of EVs. Always be charging.
Yeah, sure.
And almost like your iPhone or your phone, you charge it whenever you let the phone rest. So you always got to be charging. Whereas in an ICE vehicle, you let the fuel tank run down to the light and then you fill it. EV doesn't work that way. So all of those questions are really the answers to the study we got in those three categories are, besides the price point, because I think that is independent. The other two are really an education thing. Consumers are misunderstanding how to live with an EV, and as I said, I've been living with one for more than 2 months. And then we did an update to that study at the beginning of this year, and price point still under 500,000 rand. So that was good to see that it wasn't a once-off kind of like blip in the matrix. But because of all the work that I think everybody's doing over the last year, the range anxiety has come down. It hasn't come down by a lot, but it's come down, and also the expectations around charging has dissipated. So I think it's still there. So those are still the three kind of main categories, but I still think there's a big education job, education, I suppose, but just enlightening, of the consumer that it's different. And then I think the other thing that stood out for me in the studies, in the update as well as the original study, was the perception of what brands have EVs in our country. Believe it or not, the consumers think that we have Teslas.
We wish.
So it just goes to show you that the market needs the stuff you guys are doing at the e-mobility conference South Africa. Is the country needs this because it's those things that consumers are misunderstanding. There are no Teslas, and then I think the other thing that stood out for me, people think there are Toyota EVs. Okay, there aren't any Toyota. And we see that as searches on our website. So we can see when someone searches for an EV that doesn't exist. And and we've had searches for the Toyota Hilux in EV. It doesn't exist. I mean, the Ford F-150 is probably going to be one of the first ones that come to South Africa, when it comes. But
can you imagine an electric Hilux, George, and how well that would sell?
Africa is painted red by Toyota. They're missing a trick. I think they should bring one here ASAP.
Done. So yeah, but I mean, I think that you what you're saying is right, George. I mean, it seems to be that there's a little bit of a miseducation when it comes to EVs in the country, and people are. I suppose the analogy that was made to me a while back, which kind of stuck with me. It's like when the first people got out of a horse-drawn cart and got into a motor vehicle. You can't compare a horse-drawn cart to a motor vehicle, and it's almost the same thing that we have now. When you take journalists and you take people into an EV, you got to say to them, don't compare this to your ICE vehicle, because it isn't your ICE vehicle. This is a completely new thing. And as you say, the ABCs of charging and those types of things. Where in the next, dare I say, in the next 6 months, I mean, you obviously are aware. I mean, Audi's talking about bringing e-trons, obviously the I-Pace, the new ones coming through. BMW is bringing a lot of good stuff as well. In your expert opinion, as somebody who's an independent, but somebody who's well versed in the whole industry, what do you think is the most exciting development in, let's say, the next 6 months in the world of EVs in South Africa?
So 6 months takes us across the cusp of next year, and so that's a good time period, because at the moment we've got 4 EVs in South Africa now, and I think there's confirmation that another 4 are coming. Other brands, Audi e-tron, as you put it, etc. So that's probably the most exciting thing, is that we're going to now have 8 EV variants or brands in the country in the next 6 months. I think the other exciting thing from a battery electric vehicle, or even, there's a lot of hybrids. Jaguar Land Rover, if you haven't driven the Land Rover, the latest Land Rover hybrid, it is an amazing vehicle. The plug-in hybrids, I think, are another good step forward. Hybrids are one thing. We had the Prius, which I thought was a lunchbox, but we had the Prius, and that's not really taking the green e-mobility kind of thing forward. Yes, it's a little bit of a step, but the plug-in hybrids, I think, are maybe the middle step, and a lot of manufacturers are bringing plug-in hybrids in, which I think is a good middle step to then battery electric next year. So there's a lot of things happening in the next 6 to 12 months that is probably 2 to 3 times more than we've seen in the last 6 to 12 months. So the acceleration is there, and then you spoke about ICE vehicles and horse-drawn carts. From a petrol head point of view, people call themselves petrol heads. Most of those petrol heads have not been in an EV.
Correct, because if they had, they would convert tomorrow.
Exactly. So I would encourage everybody, before you have an opinion on the EV, just go drive. Come to places like Jaguar Land Rover's Experience Center. Go just drive one, and then the horse-drawn carts you mentioned. People are like, we want the V8 sound, and what about the tailpipe noises? And I mean, I'm a big lover of V8s. I've driven 2 of them in my life, I think, like horses were the mode of transport back in the 1800s up to 1900. Where are they now? They're on the racetrack. My sense is, and I mean, this is my own personal opinion, I think the V8s and all of that stuff are going to be relegated to the racetrack, and we're probably not going to lose it. That's probably just going to change its form. And if you want to really go and experience a petrol engine vehicle, you probably still be able to do that. But the important part is the transition to BEVs, not only to save the planet and to save the carbon emissions, but also to do the right thing, but also because our economy stands to suffer immensely if we don't do this.
100%. George, I think you and I could probably chat for another hour, but I'm sure you're eager to get out there and thrash the I-Pace. So you talk about performance. I think anyone who's driven an I-Pace would very quickly change their mindset when it comes on performance. To have a car that can do what that car can do is phenomenal. But leave us with one passing thought. Obviously, you're going to be a speaker at EMCSA next year. We're looking forward to having you speak. One passing thought for anyone out there who maybe watches this session and it piques their curiosity on EVs. One final kind of cusp or nugget of gold that you can leave with us.
Don't judge it till you drive it, and I promise you will be converted.
Fantastic. Well, George, it's been an absolute pleasure having you take some time out of your day. I'm very envious that you get to drive that 2021 I-Pace. I hope Jaguar is going to have my invites in the mail soon. But I really thank you for taking the time, and enjoy it out there. And we will see you at EMCSA 2022 in March next year. Thank you very much, sir.
Looking so forward to it. Cheers, Robert.
Cheers, George. Thank you very much. So that was George Mienie, the Chief Executive Officer of AutoTrader South Africa, talking about what AutoTrader is doing, how they're an independent and an advocate, giving us some highlights of the research that they're currently undertaking. I think some really important bits of information that he shared with us there, as well as his own personal experiences, walking the talk, as he calls it. It's been a great Coffee with EMCSA session. Tune in again next week. We'll be having another one of our exciting speakers for EMCSA 2022 on with us. From all of us here with EMCSA, we hope you have a good day wherever you are, and we hope you enjoyed the session. Goodbye.